everyone. Again, this is session 2 of the Media and Journalism webinars 2024. And today our topic is ensuring trust on media in the age of misinformation and disinformation trends. This topic is utmost importance for many of the intergovernmental agencies, but recently the World Economic Forum too identified this unprecedented wave of misinformation, disinformation trends as one of the top rising security trends of this year, 2024. And likewise, many UN agencies, Council of Europe, OSCE, they're all raising a red flag on the changing landscape of journalism, some of the barriers standing against the flow of free, independent, and credible information in the midst of this surge of the latest technologies and artificial intelligence as well. I would like to note that if it's any interest to either of you, please check out United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. He has published a series of 11 critical policy briefings under the umbrella of our common agenda. And this topic is one of them. Anytime convenient, please check that out too. I'll share more resources later on. So sustaining this information integrity is really a challenging mission for journalists, reporters, media professionals in our day to ensure the trust of public audience in media outlets. And today our expert, Heidi Basch-Harod, will shortly start leading I'm pretty sure, a thought-provoking training on this very fundamental question. Are journalists meant to tell their readers what to think and how to feel, or to provide readers with as many facts and points of view as can be collected, empowering the media consumer to think in complex ways for an increasingly complex contemporary world that we live in as of today. So let me formally introduce our trainer today. We're going to be with Heidi Basch-Harod. She is the Executive Director of Women's Voices Now, a Los Angeles-based nonprofit organization that uses film to drive positive social change to advance girls' and women's rights globally. Heidi is responsible for the vision, strategy, and international fundraising efforts that sustain and grow this organization's programs locally and globally. She brings her experience in international human rights advocacy from her primary work with Tibetan Nuns Project, the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission of the US Congress, and the Palestine-Israel Journal. She is a published author, and for over the last 10 years, she has been working with young individuals, teaching them how to be empowered, organizing workshops through Women's Voices Now and Girls' Voices Now program as well. Heidi, thank you so much. I know it's a little bit early for you, for your time zone, as you're connecting to the rest of the globe from California, but the platform is yours. And again, I highly appreciate your presence today to deliver a training on this critical issue. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Jemre. So in a moment, if anyone wants to add their information so I can continue to read it, that would be so great. Thank you so much. There's lots of people really interested in very different things. So this is great. This is great. So all the things that Jemre said, yes, are true. We will touch on those things, but I want you to know that I deeply believe in the power of the individual to make a difference, but the individual has to be coming from the right place. And a lot of, especially when you're in the business of trying to tell the truth, you have to do a lot of work on yourself. So you can read Secretary-General Antonio Guterres's 11 principles. You can read lots of articles about misinformation, disinformation, the powers that are behind that. But at the end of the day, you are all highly intelligent people and should be able to tell the difference between what is right, what is wrong, what is true, what is false. And so really this is, like I mentioned, a very interactive experience and a lot of self-reflection. To start our time together, I want to just talk about meeting and managing expectations. So I was shared that some of the reasons that you all decided to be here was an intention to foster positive change through storytelling, that you want to bring global attention to underreported political and humanitarian crises. And some of you are already doing that in your work from what I can see. And you want to build trust within your target audiences amid rising and disinformation trends. So with those things in mind, I really focused on what I wanted to share with you all today. Okay, we already did this part, or why this, we're getting to know each other. I'm learning about your areas of expertise. And I just found this little meme that I wanted to share, which is why journalism. When students learn to make sense out of the world, they become the people who will transform it. So I share that because just to highlight really the power of the people who create the information in the world is unparalleled, and it is such an incredible, crazy responsibility. And I would like you to always center that when you're doing your work, that you have the power to transform the world, and what are the intentions behind the transformation that you would like to make. I want to tell you a little bit about the work I do, sort of to set the stage for like what gives me the right to speak to all of you today and to share with you my expertise. So as Gemma mentioned, the work that I do, we're using film to drive social change that advances girls and women's rights. And when we're in the business of changing the world, I don't know if you've noticed, but we've made some progress on women's rights, but it's certainly not enough. And quite often it's susceptible to backlash. So, and this ties into how we tell our stories, of course, because we can only really create true change, that women's equality can only be achieved through influencing culture and by working with communities that are wanting to make that change. And it has to come from within. And we believe that films by women, about women, for all inspire empathy that can lead to action in favor of girls and women's rights. And that the medium of film is one of the most powerful influencers that we have to fight against backlash. Again, that makes women's rights immune to backlash. Sorry, I'm trying to see the chat at the same time as everything else. So I just want you to know that, so while what I do is not strictly journalism, we do focus specifically in documentary film. And of course, documentary film is, on some level, revealing the truth about issues that some people don't have most people don't have the time to go into deep depth in. And so just to invite you to look more into the programs that we have. Also, when you're doing your research for stories, especially when they have a historical component, we have hundreds of films that are focusing on women's rights. But of course, because women are half the population of the world, women are involved in everything. So you might find some good source material that might inspire you to look deeper into stories that you're curious about. So I wanted to share those resources. And also that all of this work, journalism, documentary filmmaking, storytelling, it has to be done in the pursuit of truth and all of its complexity. And I wanted to just take a second to think about that, which is when we're talking about truth, truth is it is a many splendored thing. We have to make the space and to really increase our ability to know that multiple truths can exist at one time. And your job as journalists, I believe, is to sift through those different truths and to find the strains and strands that are similar and come together to help really give voice to those who don't have the opportunity to have their voices heard. So my motivations and intentions for being here, and then we'll get into the meat of what we're talking about, is I really want to learn from you if you agree, disagree, or have a different analysis of the following statements and questions. And of course, there is this intersection between democracy and freedom and a healthy free press. So my assumptions for today's conversation is that democracy and freedom are under threat around the world today, that democratic values and principles are being used to actually undermine democracy by governments and other non-state entities, and that I think journalism is actually playing a dangerous role in undermining democracy when its traditional role has been to fortify and sustain democracy. And I think that journalists should uphold democratic values and principles, that journalists are responsible to fight for and contribute to freedom of the press and freedom of expression. And the work of journalists should strengthen and encourage vibrant civil society by sparking rigorous and open debate, promoting the marketplace of ideas, and serving as a bridge amongst peoples of opposing views, with an understanding that democracy and its processes are very much grounded by the art of compromise. So my question to all you, are journalists up to the challenge? This is a big order. It's a very tall order. It's a lot to take on as journalists. Here's something that I've noticed. I don't know if you've noticed this, but in the world of misinformation and disinformation, we're quite often throwing words at each other, and we think we're saying the same things, but we're actually absolutely not. So I wanted to take a moment, and this may seem very basic, but especially in a world that's increasingly interconnected, we have to make sure that we're on the same page and we're on the same operating system when we're talking about big things like democracy and freedom of press and freedom of expression and the pursuit of truth. So I want to share the following definitions. I either took in the notes of the PowerPoint that you'll see the sources, but they're all linked as well. Whether I use Merriam-Webster Dictionary or Oxford Dictionary. So a democracy is a government in which the supreme power is vested in the people and exercised by them directly or indirectly through a system of representation, usually involving periodically held free elections. Democratic principles. This is a really interesting one. While I was trying to understand how do you describe a democracy and what are the principles upon which we function in a democracy, there were actually no definitions for these two words together of democratic principles. So I actually had to cobble it together. And I thought this was a really interesting point because maybe this gives us insight into some of the mismatches and the miscommunications we have on what really creates a democratic society. And if we can try to really define those, as a community of people who are trying to give information to people to help them be better informed, to understand the world around them, I think we also have to agree on democratic principles. So this is what I cobbled together, which is that democratic principles include majority rule coupled with individual and minority rights, while respecting the will of the majority, zealously protecting the fundamental rights of individuals and minority groups. And democracies rest upon fundamental principles, not uniform practices. So that said to me that within democracy, there's room for differences, right? That we have different histories, we have different cultural associations, we have different ways of practicing democracy. And that doesn't mean that it's not a democracy, but there have to be principles that are shared, even though the practices might be different. And I think that's something that as journalists, as a journalistic community as well, that's part of your job to explain the difference between the practice and the principle and defining, does a practice meet the principle or not? So again, just lots of food for thought. And I hope that it inspires some questions in your mind or just reflection. Now, freedom. Freedom is the absence of necessity, coercion, or constraint in choice or action, the quality of being frank, open, or outspoken, a political right. Freedom of the press, the right of newspapers, magazines, etc., to report news without being controlled by the government. Show of hands, or in the how do we have freedom of the press? Would we? I'm just curious. In the room, yes or no? We think that we have freedom of the press today? No. In Pakistan, no. Big no. Depends what country you're in. Okay, I'm seeing lots of no's. That's very interesting. And very depressing.
Hello, hello.
Yes, hello.
Yes, Richard here.
Hi there.
Yes, I'm Richard Kayenda. I'm from Malawi, but basically, currently, I'm based in China.
Okay, nice to meet you.
So I thought I would comment on the question you're posing as to whether we have freedom of the press currently or not. My take on that question would be as follows. I would say yes. I would also say no. Yes, in the sense that it depends on the situation we are in. At some point, you find that government officials would wish to close our space, particularly when we want to, say, investigate or report on something that seems to be in a stark contrast with the interests of top government officials, politicians in particular. So you would agree with me that media as a fourth estate, there are times we are always blocked. There are times our freedom of expression is always limited because government feels the area we want to investigate is where they have their interest.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't necessarily wish you to, to go into such areas. But where the government feels, yes, they have no any interest in such issues, our freedom is always granted. So it's a 50-50 situation. At times we seem to have the freedom of expression. At times our freedom of expression is always shrinked by those in the high positions because they have interest in such
Yes,
issues.
that makes a lot of sense. And I think that on some level that applies to every single country in the world these days, for sure. And I think that's a really important thing to think about too, because I imagine as journalists, there's a level of subversion that has to go on these days as well. And you have to find creative ways to get your stories out there. And yeah, okay. So thank you. I'm going to think about that some more. Okay. Right. Next definition, freedom of expression, the right to express one's opinions freely. Now moving on to news, a report of recent events, previously unknown information, something having a specified influence or effect. The definition of journalism, the collection and editing of news for presentation through the media. Writing characterized by a direct presentation of facts or description of events without an attempt at interpretation. And or writing designed to appeal to current popular taste or public interest. When I was putting together this definition of journalism, I wanted to ask all of you a question. Does anyone see a contradiction between the two bold type definitions of journalism above? So if journalism is supposed to be the collection editing of news, but it can be characterized by direct presentation of facts, but it's also defined as writing designed to appeal to current popular taste or public interest, is there already sort of an inherent contradiction and challenge in doing the work of a journalist? What might it already be confusing if those are the definitions of journalism? I'd love to hear from you all. Obviously, that was a leading question too, because I definitely think there's a contradiction there. So just curious your thoughts about that. And I'm happy to hear more voices too. You don't have to put it in the chat. Please don't feel restricted by the writing or anything.
Well, I would appreciate if you can use the hand up icon so Heidi can name the participant, and then we're not going to have a traffic of clashes of voices.
Yes. Okay. Mujtaba, I see your hand up. Make sure to unmute yourself. You're unmuted. Oh, but we can't hear you. No sound.
I think your audio is not working, Mujtaba. So please try typing your answer for this time.
And I'm just going through to see if anyone else is raising their hand.
Can I talk?
Yes. Who is this?
Okay, Rita.
Rita.
I'm
Hi,
just
Rita.
wondering. Yeah, hello. In journalism, you have sometimes the agenda settings and the frame also framing. So how it fits to journalism to have an agenda settings as the speaker before some minutes ago I was talking in the agenda settings. Sometimes we teach people how to think about some issues. So is it about, here we can ask, is it real journalism? Is it sometimes also they try to spread some misinformation and misinformation? So is it journalism, the agenda settings, or it's not more about agenda settings with journalism in terms of misinformation and this in fact checking and all these stuff?
Yep. Thank you. Let's see. Was the audio fixed? Lena, I see your hand is up. Yes, Lena?
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Great. Yeah, I mean, reporting news, I think as journalists, we're always conscious of our own biases, and we try to fact check multiple things and make sure that we are presenting as unbiased and as close to objective report as we can. I'm an editor, and what I find kind of contradictory about that is that in some sense I'm involved in curating what counts and what doesn't count as news. And so I see a difference in the kind of power that I wield in those two roles, between writing a news report, which I think can be that can be like a full expression of freedom and of journalistic ideals, but the act of editing and also the act of PR dissemination of news facts, I think, can become an overly curated version of real life facts that can erode that initial objectivity. Like, not everybody listens to the speech that a prime minister makes, but everybody reads the press release. So who's writing that press release? What do they choose to bring out? And in that way, I think often editing and framing can negatively impact what is initially a more objective news reporting landscape.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So just reading more in the, I saw a hand go up. Antonia, your hand just went up. Let me just read the comments. Did your hand go up not intentionally? No, never mind. Okay, so just to read some that from Ahmad, journalism is creating pure communication among the people via various types of media. Mujtaba, thank you for writing that there is a contradiction. Journalism doesn't mean to please a larger audience and report according to their taste. Rather, it is a report of events and objective grounds as unbiased. From Amanpreet, a journalist should strike a balance between what people want to know and what people should know. There's freedom of speech, but I cannot, freedom after speech. Oh, interesting. Thank you, Fidelis. That's a character from history, Idi Amin. This imbalance is what leads to media houses being labeled for one political party and another. From Glorious, also social media and the attention span of our audience has also led to the consolidation of what we send out. We cannot always present all information we gather. That is why the journalist's responsibility of truthfulness is so important. And Aisha, journalism means to report people about what is happening. Okay, so while we say that we want to approach our news reporting without bias, et cetera, you can see even the way that we individually approach what journalism is already going to color the way that we report our news. So I think that's just an interesting thing to put in our minds too, is there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of self-reflection that has to go on as journalists about, again, what's the intention for writing the piece? Do you see yourself as upholding democratic principles? There's just so many questions. I hope that you're reflecting on really understanding that, yes, you're writing a story, you're collecting facts, but you're also at the same time having to have sort of this metaphysical experience of really reflecting on where you're coming from in the story. So more definitions that I want to bring into the room. Advocacy journalism, journalism that advocates a cause or expresses a viewpoint. Then there's activist journalism, the use of journalistic skills within activist media to report on and inspire political engagement with one or more issues. Activist journalists are typically activists first and journalists second, with the latter function serving the former. And then we have activist media, which is newspapers, magazines, online, and other forms of media produced by and for individuals and groups engaged in social and political campaigning and organizing. Although the phrase is most commonly associated with left-wing causes, it can also be applied to media produced by the far right. And lastly, a content creator, an integral part of the modern digital ecosystem, responsible for entertaining, educating, and influence. These individuals have given birth to the creator economy. So a note on this definition of content creator, I included it here because in the research that I was doing, quite often there was intermingling of this idea of journalist and content creator. Content creator does not have an actual definition by Merriam-Webster Dictionary or Oxford Dictionary. This actually came from a digital space website and Adobe. So I just think that's a very interesting thing, again, to keep in mind. And I'm curious from all of you, when you're looking at these definitions of different forms of journalism, different types of people who identify as journalists, where do you think that your approach to journalism falls? Are you traditional, activist, or content creator? And then I wanted to know from all of you, is a content creator a journalist? Yes, you will get all the information after the session, I promise. Jemre promises, because I will send it to Jemre and she will get it all to you.
Well, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I would like to say about the definition of journalism. Journalism is like a different color. Anyone can express those colors with any interpretation of idea, but with the respect of the code of the journalism. That's why I'm thinking. There's not a line, specific line for the journalists. It's only to communicate, and that communication should be received by the population of spectator, of auditor in different color.
Thank you.
Henry and Sarah was also having their hands up.
Yes, I can't see everyone's hand, so thank you, Gemma. Yes, please.
I can assist you along
thank
the
you.
line.
Henry and then Sarah.
Henry,
Okay.
if you're available.
Hi.
Yes.
Okay, hi everyone. So I just want to add the definition of journalism. I mean, journalism is not born to be unbiased or neutral. I mean, if we look back the history of journalism, we all know there was a time, we've seen the rampant of yellow journalism, and yellow journalism has partially caused the Spanish and American War and the assassination of then President of the United States, Mr. William McKinley, I guess. So, and after that, the public just gradually were fed up with the misinformation and disinformation. People were not willing to be deceived anymore, and at the same time, the flourish of penny press has attracted a bunch of talents in journalism and the media industry. So these talents, they just gradually and naturally became more aware about the mission, the goal of journalists, of a newspaper, and they end up form a community with shared values, and that's the part of the origin of professionalism in journalism. So I think we should just keep in mind that news is not going to be unbiased and neutral, and the idea of objectivity to me is more like a myth, because I mean there are always been different frames, different narratives, different tones or different styles, and there's no way we can just present the fact like mirror. So that's my idea.
I really like that. Thank you, Henry. I think I love that because it acknowledges that we're human and we are by default subjective, and it's a sort of a crazy expectation that subjective beings are going to create objective information. And it highlights how important freedom of the press is, right? That we have a diversity of viewpoints, and that is maybe the point. And so that's an interesting question too. I see most of you who are writing in the chat identify as activist journalists. That's fascinating. So my next question, not to answer right now, but does that bring about a sort of a necessity? So one of my things is I'm a trained historian. And part of what you learn in becoming a historian is historiography, right? So how is the history written and who is writing it? And you look deeply into who the person or the people who are writing the history, because that again is gonna influence the way that they tell the story. And there needs to be some sort of, in my opinion, there always needs to be some sort of transparency in that. So I wonder, I'm just thinking out loud, I wonder, as journalists, is there some level of, and especially because we're in such a diverse media landscape where you may choose not to work for a big news organization, or like many people are writing that they're moving into content creation and not traditional journalism. If you want to be respected and all those things, is there a necessity to be transparent about where you're coming from and what you're doing? Because if you don't have an institution behind you and you're really just representing yourself, well, who are you, right? Like, who are you? And because of digital media, you have this incredible power to influence the people, but what are your intentions for doing that? But Sarah, yes, I see your hand. Please go for it.
Yes, so just to finish off Henry's thought, absolutely, as biased as we are, we cannot be expected to have objective points of view. Objectivity, as Henry said, is a myth. To finish off that one, and to start off this one, I do not view content creation as part of journalism traditionally. It has never been that. It came to rise somewhere around 2014, 2015, with a whole bunch of analytics to play with, how much grasp, how much reach one can get. And I think journalism traditionally built its repertoire on news and advertisement. It was a natural progression for many journalists who at the time were freelancers or not getting jobs in mainstream media, was to gradually build their own repertoire and channels and all of that sort of stuff. But to answer your question, yes, it is necessary to be as transparent as possible, to especially when you're trying to disseminate facts or quote unquote facts. There is no such thing as a reality or truth. It is always created or narrated from a certain person's perspective, whether it's left, alt-left, right, alt-right, or somewhere in the middle. That's my personal opinion, and absolutely you may have to disagree or disagree as much as you want, but we are biased humans. As humans as we can get, we are biased. So my political bias is always reflected in no matter what I do, whatever I write. And I think as a journalist, activist or not, or traditional or not, it is our burden to let people know if we have a bias and lay it bare. That way, if people want to read our stuff, they know that we're not hiding them into listening to us or something like that. But if they want to still listen to us, it's the transparency as it is.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. That's very insightful. And I'm not pushing back it again. This is just in the spirit of conversation. So once upon a time, I went to Israel, Palestine to try to solve the conflict. Yeah. Of course, obviously, I did not do that successfully. And I placed myself in East Jerusalem, and I worked at the Palestine-Israel Journal. And I started a blog called Comparing Truths for Resolution. Because what I realized is that everyone really is sharing their truth. And I believed, and I still believe, that somewhere in amidst all the truths, because multiple truths can exist at one time, that there's an essence of a shared reality and a shared truth, and that's sort of the key to unlocking the difficult conflicts and issues that we have. I think even if I were to be passionate about abortion rights, I would also want to compare truths for resolution. So I do think that personally, and I'm also a spiritual person, so I think that I do believe that there is truth and that there can be a shared reality. And I think if we don't seek the shared reality and the shared truth, that we're actually we are doomed. So I think I actually think it would be a noble aspiration for journalists to try to bring people together around a shared reality and a shared truth, as difficult as that is, and not dictating what that truth or that reality is, but again, being comfortable with putting uncomfortable, contradicting things in one place and us sitting with those things, right? So
yes, in J School, we always talked about, so J School is the journalism school that we go to, no matter where it is, it's called J.
J School, yes.
Yeah, so usually when we go to J School, we often talked about getting uncomfortable with this idea of being comfortable. So bringing to bear the uneasiness of a thought and then sitting with it. I think that is a journalist's burden. And many journalists I think in modern day, or in the light of influencing people, not always, but sometimes lose that nobility.
Yeah, I also, and Mark, I see your hand, so I'm going to call on you. I also think it's I'm not a neuroscientist, but having watched films about the effects of social media and the dopamine hit that we get when people like stuff, and then we're going to do more of the things that people like, and so we kind of lose our center, our moral compass, our internal compass, and we're just trying to get that hit of what we want to be liked, we want to be loved, we want to belong. And because we're flawed human beings, we're even going to bring that into our professional realms, especially and even when we have the grave responsibility of being the information bearers to the people. But Mark, please go ahead.
I just wanted to add, so I really agree with you with regards to sharing both sides of the story. At least that's what I try to do in my writing as much as possible, especially with regards to like conflict resolution and stuff like this. But I want to add another maybe point of discussion about content creation. I do think that it's not traditional journalism, but that's where journalism is heading. And I think that at least it's a problem I'm having at the moment. So I think I have a decent pen, and that's what I have. But getting that out there is difficult. And especially these days, we need to look at the audience. And the audience is not as interested in reading long-winded articles and stuff like that. It's very much headline, you know, Instagram and social media kind of journalism. So I think that we need to change the way in which we report on issues in order to meet a wider audience. And that seems to be the case for content creation, that we have to kind of change what we're doing at the moment. I don't know if anyone agrees with me here, but that's kind of what I'm saying.
That's actually what you just said is actually a really interesting, and Lena, I see your interesting comment. Everyone has very interesting things to say and share. I want to segue to this chat about democracy, because Mark, what you bring up here is trying to find, you know, it's okay. So let me just read the slide and then we'll get into the conversation. So and Mark, this will be a continuation of your comment, because what you just said needs to come through more. Okay, so 2023 Pew Research Center survey of 30,861 people between February 20 and May 22 in 24 countries described representative democracy, or a democratic system where representatives elected by citizens decide what becomes law, as a somewhat or very good way to govern their country. Yet, globally, the health of democracy has declined significantly in many nations around the world. Support for representative democracies, where you have elected officials, is on the decline, whereas support for direct democracy, the people vote directly, not with a representative, and authoritarian models of government are on the rise. And support for these types of governing approaches skews based on alignment with the left or the right, you know, quote unquote, income levels and things like the role of religion in one's life. And okay, and the reasons for the dissatisfaction with democracy are cited that politicians are out of touch and disconnected from lives of ordinary citizens. I'm curious, so okay, let's challenge that for a moment. We know more about politicians and their agendas than ever before. No one's life is private, and they theoretically know more about our opinions and views on things than ever before. So are they really disconnected, or ... Love to talk about that. And in 18 countries, when asked about ideology, people who place themselves in the center are especially likely to feel unrepresented. So the challenge that I'm proposing is, do we think that media outlets and technologies are contributing to this feeling of alienation of those in the center, which is the majority of the people? So how does this relate to what Mark just said? The thing that came to my mind is, it's a little dangerous, no, it's very dangerous, that news has become a business, right? Because truly, in democracy, representative democracy, very few people actually get to make the decisions, right? So that's why you have different levels of influence. You have people who focus on getting into the ear of the politicians so that their interests are seen through. And then ideally, because the politician is responsible to the people, they need to not only listen to the people giving them money, but they also have to listen to the people lower down the pyramid. And there's this very interesting pyramid, right? It's the convoluted triangle: the politician, the media, the public. Who's setting the agenda, who creates the priority, and based on what information? And what Mark's comment brought up to me is that in content creation, I'll go back to this slide if we want to talk about the things that I wrote here, is that in content creation, it's literally supposed to be like a mass media, right? Everyone is supposed to care about an issue. When in history did everyone care about any issue, right? Most people, we would just give our trust to the people elected to make the decisions for us. But now, again, is it a personal interest to get those likes and to become Insta famous? Are you really coming from the place of intention to create a more informed public to help make better decisions? Are you rooted in democratic principles? If you believe in democracy, do you believe in democratic principles? Like, these are all the questions I would want journalists to be asking themselves as they're doing whatever traditional, activist, or content creation, right? So any comments about this this slide about, how is it that people polled would think that the politicians are out of touch? I think that's like a kind of a lazy conclusion that people came to. Maybe that's rude, but I believe that's just a lazy conclusion that, yes, the politicians are out of touch. I don't think that's true. And then this, do we think that media outlets and technologies are contributing to the feeling of alienation? Any comments there? I could also keep moving. I got so many more slides and I see the time is just flying. Now I see Antonia's hand. That is raised.
Yeah, so just like I got several things I want to talk about. So we just back to the, is the content creator, actually the journalist. What I'm thinking about, because we know when we produce there's content and also do the journalists, we producing the news, actually we all telling the stories. So actually it just depends on what people are our targeted audience, and also where we're gonna to publish this news. So why I think a bit different, because content creators, basically it's just everyone can be that. Everyone can post on Instagram and say hey, this thing's really happened and we definitely need to care about this one. And they don't need to have a very professional training about them. But the difference between the content creator and also the professional journalist is we have been training to how to produce the news. And also we have been trained how does the news we want to create, does it make the public interest or not? So we've been told those things so that we can create those it's not, I won't use the word meaningful, but actually I would say because there are a lot of the guideline, and also there's a bit of law, and also the ethnic codes need us to, as a journalist, to follow. So we will be more careful about what things we're gonna to report on. And for the content creator, as I said, it's a massive media world. Nobody will control that one, because everyone have the freedom to explain their opinion, right? So I think a little bit different. And also that's the media outlets and also technology is contributing the feeling. I would say the time is keep moving. So it's if the technology keep growing, it will definitely happen. So what we say, well, what we can do is just it's a bit hard to answer this question. I would just say, because we can't stop the technology keep growing. Right. So I would say more legalism about what things you are going to publish. And also you really need to know if you publish something the fake news. Yeah. Especially during the COVID period, there's too many things happen. So just we need to get some legalization on that part, so that you can be a content creator and to publish those meaningful things. But also you also need to know if you publish things wrong, there's something you need to be responsible for. Yeah.
Heidi, sorry, one side note, as you keep the session interactive, please feel free to add the next 40 minutes into your session. Oh, great. No rush. Yes, because we have the audience joining in. No worries.
Good. Okay, I was hopeful that you would allow that. Thank you. Glorious, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm really loving the discussion. And I want to talk about your last slide about the fact that the conclusion that politicians are out of touch from the public.
Oh, yes.
So my own take on that, I think, is quite connected to press freedom and this discussion we're having about technology. So if you come from a country where politicians are still in the 80s, they are 70, 80, and there's not a lot of young people representation in government, it is clear that those people might not be averse with technology use. I think there's a kind of connection between the privacy we have and the use of technology. Is there someone that is on social media, is on Instagram, person will be more likely to show parts of their life and have discussion on Twitter. For someone who's vocal on Twitter and replies to posts by government official handles, and you can easily see this is what the person thinks. But for somebody who was born in the 90s and hasn't acclimated himself with the use of social media, and the only conversation that he or she has on social media is through curated social media handles. So the social media handles they create for for political ops to show that they visited such and such place. They provided such and such amenities to a particular group of people. So those are the things that were open to through their social media and through their expression of their thoughts. So I still think that there is still a way for us to think that politicians are out of touch, especially for, again, if they are older, and of course, as citizens sitting at home who are not satisfied with the way the country is moving, who feel that we are not heard, who speak through the opportunities that the media also allows us, like speaking on radio, calling in on programs, writing to editors, of course, also using social media to reply to their official handles and speaking about things we want changed, things we want changed, and then we are not heard and nothing is being done, and the cycle keeps continuing. We have older politicians again and again. So it's, of course, as citizens would feel that disconnect and we feel like politicians are out of touch because no change is really happening, and we are going through the same process again. So I would think that, in conclusion, my entire point is that for us to think that politicians are out of touch must come from a place where we're not really exposed to where they are. We don't see what they really think. The only thing we can say we have an idea of is if somebody takes a clandestine video of their conversation with a particular person, and those kind of usually cause up on social media because we're not really open to those kind of conversations. So there's still, of course, a chance that we think politicians are out of touch.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glorious. And also, I'll just, before I'm going to go, I see Rita and Lina, so we'll go in that order. And I would just say to Glorious, just to add that there's definitely at like an inflection point, right? Where politicians who have been there a long time, I think they forget why they became politicians, or they had not good intentions anyway to become politicians, and they're having to straddle different generations and how different generations get their information, but then who they see as their greatest allies in staying in power. So I agree with you. I agree with your nuanced answer. Okay, Rita.
Okay, I'm working on a case of Iran, and which is for me it's a useless case for now, because I'm not finding any information on social media except what the government is giving for news agencies. Okay, so what I was thinking, if I cannot reach people from Lebanon and Iran, I would never go there. I need just some links. Even journalists, I cannot reach journalists from Iran because they are always, everyone is using fake accounts or nicknames. So my question here, if they are controlling people that much and controlling social media and centralizing the information in a way that you cannot reach there, even the country, and you are scared to be kidnapped or anything like that. So how to work on democracy? I mean,
that's you bring up a really good point. Like if there's press in a non-democratic country, like the idea of a free press or just a press or a media in general is the idea is that there is freedom. But
forget about being a journalist. I acted as a normal person searching for someone as a fisherman in Iran, just trying to chatting with him. I'm not even finding a fisherman. Even in Yemen, it's the same case, even though there is a problem between Iran and Yemen. So this is really interesting. Both they are not in good terms, but both they are having the same strategy with media and social media.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that point. If you need contacts in Yemen, Iran, or Lebanon, be in touch with me. I know filmmakers in all three and would be happy to connect you as best as I can.
Thank you. Yes, sure.
Great. Lina.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on the idea of reasons for dissatisfaction with democracy, and the idea that politicians, when people perceive politicians as being out of touch, that erodes belief in democracy, and the role of the media in that. It has this kind of power in both directions, in the sense that I grew up in the UK, where the newspapers are really savage towards politicians. And on the one hand, you think of, you know, having the freedom to contradict authority as being evidence of free speech, and it is. On the other hand, by dragging politicians through the mud as the UK does, is that, in a sense, turning them into these very disconnected figures that people don't associate with, and therefore the satisfaction with democracy declines. Now I live in Denmark, where there is none of that. The landscape of the media is much, much kinder. If someone was to attack politicians in the same kind of, with the same savagery that they do in the UK, it just wouldn't be accepted by society and by other media outlets. And I just think that's an interesting point that I've come to realize from these two countries, is that media can both erode people's confidence in politicians in a responsible way in order to further general freedom, or it could have an adverse effect in the sense that people begin to feel dissatisfied with a democracy.
That's such a fascinating point. And yeah, and I am, as all things, I imagine the right thing to do is strike a balance between the two in the end, right? But it depends on what kind of society we want to live in, or societies we want to live in, and where we're trying to get to. What are the pressing needs of the place? Yes, we have a whole conversation about what you just said. Yes, definitely.
Heidi, Aksa raised her
Aksa
hand. I believe it's the first time.
Yes, Aksa, please. Yes.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Yes,
hello. Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, I'm from Pakistan. And just to suppress the media, Pakistan's government banned the Twitter last month. So we were not allowed to criticize the government and not military. People are getting kidnapped or disappeared if they speak against the government. So that's how they are shutting the voice of media and creating censorship.
We can't hear you, Aksa, so well, but I hear you saying the situation in Pakistan is very dire and that there is no freedom of the press there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so you have chosen a very brave profession to take on such a system. I applaud you and admire you, and thank you.
Thank you.
I hope that you're able to gain strength and inspiration from your colleagues over these sessions, and I feel like there's always a way. Water even goes through a rock, you know, like there's a way to find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed.
But it is not easy. It's not easy. So Mujtaba and Henry, I see your hands, but I have so many more things I want to share with you. So let's you could put it in the chat, or let's see if it is still relevant in further slides. So there are solutions to democracy's global crisis, and this is actually where all of you come in. So the Pew survey asked open-ended questions around what could improve the state of democracy in the world. And here are and also I'm basing this whole conversation on the assumption that everyone here as journalists believes that democracy is the way to go, that we need to have a free, open society. Need to have free, open societies, and that free, open societies are more peaceful, et cetera, and so on. So that's my assumption here. So the main responses about how to resolve the global crisis that democracy is in is improving political leadership, government reform, improving the economy, and finally, expecting more from citizens. Citizens need to be more informed, engaged, tolerant, and respectful of one another. So as a journalist, do you see yourself helping citizens be more informed, engaged, tolerant, and respectful of one another? So I want to know, so if you're comfortable to share that, I think this is really important because, again, if we're identifying as activist journalists, or if we are saying we're moving in the direction of content creation, again, what is your intention for doing this work? Why do you want to do this work? And if you are someone who is a proponent of democracy, do you agree that one solution is that citizens as societies, as global societies, we need to be informed and engaged, but we also need to be kind, tolerant, and respectful of one another? And that I would argue is really being lost these days, no matter where you are. And the media is really contributing to that, to polarization of society. And yet that is what, if you want to know what the people want to live in a world where they're more informed, but they're also respectful of one another. Let's see. Yes. Okay. Mujtaba, that's a good point. The politicians themselves are struggling to speak. So that's another question I have for all of you. That's why people with power to shut media in order to, yes, Aisha, that's a good point. Free and open society is great for ordinary people, but not for the ones who are seeking power. That's why people with power try to shut media in order to suppress the freedom. But again, there's an interesting interplay because you can't really have power without people, right? Like at some point you do need people to get to power, and then you consolidate your power and then you get rid of people. You know, that's a whole other conversation too. Moving to the next slide. There's more good news that people still have faith in you as journalists. And of course, this is what I'm about. Viktor Orban. Yes, exactly. And many others, right? Hitler is a good example of that too. So Donald Trump, again, not everyone's the same, but like, yes, these very incredible personalities that use their charisma to get the people behind them, and then they toss them aside once they get where they need to go. So more good news, the people still have faith in you. So this is a US poll, not global, but just, you know, let's just extrapolate from the American experience that World Press Freedom Day is May 4th. And the Pew Research Center released a new study with a heartening finding that a strong majority, 73% of Americans, say that press freedoms are extremely or very important. However, at the same time, large majorities of Americans believe that US news organizations are at least somewhat influenced by corporations and financial interests, that's 84%, or by the government and political interests, 83%. And this includes about half of Americans who say news organizations are influenced a great deal by financial interests, 51%, or political interests, 49%. So my conclusion here was that there is a trust issue with the establishment and international media. Agree, disagree, and we need to build trust back between the media and the consumers. So I'm going to keep going unless anyone has a burning thing to say. Yes. So now we're getting in sort of like the workshop part of things. These are questions for you, all of you. If you have a paper and pen, I'd love for you to write down your answers. This can also be homework. Because I think this is getting at the root of how we tackle misinformation and disinformation. If we acknowledge that we can be transparent about what's the motivation for being a journalist, are we a content creator? Are we an activist journalist? Are we a traditional journalist? Again, it's all about why are you called to this profession? Why do you think that you are entitled to help people understand what's happening in the world, and where are you coming from with that? So my first question, is the role of the journalist to tell the readers what to think and how to feel? Question 2, does a journalist have to suppress their own freedom of expression in order to be fair and balanced in the reporting? Question 3, are you consciously aware of your own biases and assumptions when working on a story? If yes, do you have a method in place to check your biases and assumptions? And how do you know when you're succeeding in that? So Lena shared that she does have a method. I'd be curious about what that method is and how we can ever really check our biases and assumptions. And question 4, do you work in a job where you feel pressured to write to promote an agenda, or is your place of work a place where freedom of press and freedom of expression are embodied? And I'll just go through all the questions, and then I want to focus on question 2. I'd be so curious what this group has to say, but the next question, we already answered this. How do you identify your position within the media landscape as a journalist, an activist journalist, or a content creator? But then on that, my more important question is, which approach has the highest probability of contributing to a society with more informed, engaged, tolerant, and respectful citizens? And I think that's an important question to ask yourself and for us to discuss. And then question 6, what are your measures of success for the stories you cover? And what do I mean by that? Again, if you're moving into content creation, or if you're an activist journalist, what is your measure of success? Is it that you know that you put your systems of checks and balances for your assumptions and biases into action, and you went out and got a wide array of opinions and viewpoints and perspectives, and I'm saying the same thing over again, but you really did your due diligence to find all the different points of view for the situation that you're covering? And that's your measure of success, no matter how many likes it gets, how many shares, if it gets picked up or not. Really, like, what we're talking about, your integrity here. So let me just look. I saw Aksa's hand go up. So are you supposed to answer the questions now or later or after the session? So so all of the above. It can be now, it can be later, and it can be always. I feel like these questions are really important to keep in mind when you're doing your work, in the back of your mind. Like, what is your intention? What is your motivation for doing the work that you do? And above all else, if you know that the people of the world want to live in a place where civil society is respectful, tolerant, etc., is what you're putting out in the world contributing to that environment? Because that's where you as a journalist have the power to make a difference. Is to you're not politicians, okay? So that's not your realm, but you are the media. So what are you putting out there that contributes to a better world that is respectful, kind, and tolerant? So I'm just curious about some of you, if you have an answer. Does a journalist have to, because I think it kind of, all of these questions are kind of asking the same thing in different ways. So I'm curious your response to, does a journalist have to suppress their own freedom of expression in order to be fair and balanced in their reporting? And if someone wants to answer a different question, because that's more interesting to them, by all means, please do so. And I saw Sarah's hand go up, but I want to make sure that there's no one that we haven't heard from that would want to take on that question. I don't see any other hands.
We have Fiston Mahamba. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, I'm Fiston Mahamba from Republic Democratic of Congo.
Hello.
And I think that to answer this question, we have to do difference between a citizen and journalist. You can be citizen, but when you are working as a journalist, you have to identify yourself as journalist. You can't have opinion. You just there for reporting fact. So I think that this line can help us to understand very good and to take any position about this second question.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's go Sarah and then Antonia.
Hi. So I think there has to be a balance struck between both of these things. When I'm writing political stories, I sometimes have to hold back a little bit in order to strike fairness and balance with majority of the crowd, or let's say the people who are going to read the story. But if it's too radical of freedom of expression, or let's say it's being held back, then maybe that's not the story I want to write with that specific outlet.
Mm-hmm.
There's all sorts of political ideas and agendas and political stories out there. In the current climate that we have going on in the Middle East, which is where I'm originally from, it always feels like we're not letting the people of the Middle East tell their stories the way things happen.
I couldn't agree more. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when I became a journalist, when I felt the need to tell my people's story the way it's unfolding, it's pretty pathetic to see the Western media at large and the global North at large, whether it's academia, journalism, or just practice. It doesn't really hold up to its tenets of ethics and principles that we so very well swore to be abiding by.
Mm-hmm.
That is where the main I come in, and that is, I think, every conscious journalist, and a good one at that, would have to reckon with every story that they write, because there will be a margin that you do want to hold back a little bit, because for whatever reason, it may be not as sophisticated, or it may be it's too raw an opinion. Mm-hmm. But there is a time when facts and opinion should go side by side, and they should be equally looked at as a factual reporting. The long-held principle in journalism has been that we cannot opine.
Mm-hmm.
And factual reporting is the way, but does that factual reporting really tell the facts, or curated facts? That is the more important question that I would like to ask myself when I'm writing a story. Whose story is not being shared, who is not being told, and whose story is always being shared? That is one question I like to ask myself. That's all.
Yep. Thank you. So Antonia and then Ngea. Yes. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. You'll pronounce it properly when you speak.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let you know that at the beginning, I'm a a sexual health advisor, and human rights advocate, as an activist journalist. So I'm working on the field. I'm a person who is in charge to communicate about all process about concerning health. So as a health mediator, it's not my role to let know to the population what is positive on my side. I need to be objective about information that I'm giving to the population. You know, we have the information that we are communicate to population is very sensitive, even concern vaccine, even concern research, even concern COVID-19. So we need to be clear. So you don't need to take the position of our side. We need to be objective about the reality of the situation. Because if there is an error about our communication, like fake news, the situation will be very disastrous. So we need to be sure on what we are communicate to the population. Yeah, so that is my share of experience.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and of course this is a whole other conversation. But I don't know if you've noticed, but there's definitely like generational differences in understanding journalism these days. Like so I agree with what you say, and I would argue, or I would just offer. I think about today how the trust in institutions has been so whittled away around the world that I feel like younger generations of journalists, content creators, etc., don't feel satisfied or don't feel that the institutions are upholding their own values. And so they're creating new values, perhaps. And I feel like that's so, and so we have this assumption that we're all operating on the same system. That's why I did all of those definitions, right? Because I would want to know that I'm talking to a room of people that we have the same definitions for these terms, because I don't believe that we have those anymore. I feel like we use the same words in the same language and they mean different things these days. And so, and then we walk into a room and assume like we all approach journalism the same way. We all went to journalism school and learned the same ethics and principles and approach and did the same trainings, but because of our experiences in the world, and the world is a very different place than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, our approach to this work is very different. And yet we're all still in the world together. And there's and some of these conflicts and like the sort of the shortcomings of journalism and the lack of trust that people have in journalism is due to this rapidly changing media landscape and digital landscape. And if we don't take the time to even talk about those things amongst journalists and then to the public, you know, again, it's like we're all sort of screaming at each other and putting news out there, but we're not getting anywhere different, you know. So that's just my rant for the moment, that it feels like I agree with everything you just said. And I don't know that everyone in this room would agree too, that they approach their work in the same way. So yes. Okay, Antonia, you've been so patient. Thank you.
All right. So I'll just say, like, actually it depends on people on the different position, because like now, like even I'm the uni student, but I'm also like doing an internship at those like the mainstream, the big name media company for the like in the journalist role. So like the first document that we received, it told us to don't share any like sensitive contacts on your for social media platforms, and don't share any like Twitter like tweets or posts to show your political bias. So if we want to get that job, we're not allowed to share those things. So I think it's actually it really depends on what you want. Because if you want this job, you definitely don't have your own freedom of expression because you are the representative for this media company. So what you said might represent the people who work for this company. But on the other hand, if you are just like what we talked about before, if you are just a content creator, and like you don't represent any of the company or any of the like the people, you can definitely share whatever you want as a like a freelance journalist the role. So I just like it's like very wild to like to discuss like, oh, do we have to suppress our freedom of expression or not? Actually, it just depends on what kind of position that you are at and what your like purpose for sharing those story.
And sometimes it comes down to how am I going to pay my bills, right? Like sometimes that's it too. It's like, yes, I have opinions on things, or yes, I'm actually reporting something much more sensational, that is because that's going to get me the clicks and the ads, and that's how I'm going to pay my bills. And that's a problem too, right? That's this is a problem. But yes, thank you, Antonia. Lena?
I wanted to talk a little bit about countering biases. And I just have maybe one thing, one detail that I think is important to share. I have like general approaches in terms of like assessing what news I see and, you know, what's the local media reporting, what's it not reporting, where do I stop investigating? But more and more, someone brought up a point earlier about like Global North journalists telling the Global South story. And I think that that same thing can be said of many perspectives, and nothing can replace lived experience. Someone recently said to me, it was a Nigerian economist who works in like diversity and inclusion. She said, you have to wear a shoe to know where it hurts. And she's very right. You know, sometimes as a journalist, you have to counter your biases by thinking, perhaps instead of telling this story, how can I use my voice and my power to make space for somebody else to tell this story? Maybe, you know, facilitating that within your story, but by not paraphrasing, by not being, you know, the name on the article. Collaborative journalism is sometimes better. And, you know, are you representing broad voices by, you know, thinking about neurodiverse perspectives or maybe queer perspectives, migrant, refugee perspectives? There are so many different ways to perceive a story. And sometimes there have been times where I'm writing a piece and I realize I shouldn't be writing this piece. I should be using my power at this media to say to my editor, I know somebody else that would tell this story better. And that can be quite difficult because it's very dog eat dog and you need to pay your bills.
Yep.
But sometimes opening the door for someone else is the best way to be a journalist.
I love that. And I think we should all do that as much as possible. I love that idea of collaborative journalism because that actually creates a dialogue, right? Like in a collaborative journalistic piece, you could actually see your own evolution around something, you know, in a current, like you have these assumptions and then you're actually writing something with someone and then you come to an entirely different conclusion together or because that person shared with you. Yeah, I like that a lot. I really love that. Mujtaba.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Hooray. Yes.
Finally. Yeah. All right. So I just wanted to add just one thing. I worked at Radio Pakistan. It's a state-owned entity, and I used to get charge sheet for the questions that I have to ask the guests. And I was told that I even cannot ask cross questions. For example, if I have asked the guest that where have you studied, and if he has given me name of his university, I cannot ask any cross question. So, and also I wanted to, one thing before when we were discussing democracy, that there are also hybrid regimes, authoritarian countries where even the politicians are under control. Here in Pakistan, the judiciary is compromised, the journalists, I think like we are at 152 at the freedom of press index in the world. So I just wanted to add, politicians are, even politicians are bound that they cannot cross the limits. And there are some authoritarian rules by the establishment of that country. Like in Pakistan, the army, the establishment controls everything. So I think we should also take that thing in count and just not criticize the politicians, because I know a few of the politicians here in Pakistan who cannot even come on media and do their press conferences.
Yeah.
We journalists in Pakistan are like, there's 1 year earlier, a prominent journalist in Pakistan was killed, Arshad Sharif. And today, the prominent journalist, Imran Riaz Khan, is arrested in Pakistan. So we journalists are paying price in these authoritarian countries. And we should also talk about that and just not criticize democracy, because here in Pakistan and other African countries, like one of the colleagues here from Bangladesh was also typing the same thing that I'm saying. We haven't even witnessed the true democracy here.
Right.
That is why we don't believe, we don't criticize democracy, because we haven't even witnessed democracy since our inception. Just wanted to add this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I'm holding that. Yes, this is very challenging. And I admire the people in your country who are trying to make it a better place for all of its citizens. It's no small feat, that is for sure. Okay, so I'm going to, so again, all those questions, okay, before I go there, all those questions, I would love if you keep them on hand. At the end, I'm gonna, of course, share with you my contact information if you wanna continue the conversation and answer a question, have an email back and forth or a Zoom. I would love to arrange that and just to explore these ideas more. But again, it's really about, if we're gonna fight misinformation, disinformation, build trust in the media, you really have to be in touch with why you're doing the work that you're doing and be transparent about that. I think that's really important. I often think, like, if we are transparent about our motivations, then automatically we build trust, because then someone really can make their own informed opinion. If we do say, I know that there are those in this room that say the role of journalism is to be objective and to give objective truths and not a narrative, but a story. I would be in the camp of not knowing that that's truly possible. So to the best of our ability, we have to have the humility that, yes, we are human and we are susceptible to bias, and we do our best that we can to not let that into our work. But it could happen, and we have to build the trust by being transparent about the human condition. So this slide, again, all of you are a little past this, but I wanted to just as a little, just like, again, like a little exercise, like once in a while, if you want to challenge yourself, like pushing past your human limitations, that, we find a topic, conflict, issue, current event that you have very strong feelings about, and for every source that confirms your bias or assumption about the issue, find another that challenges it. Write an analysis of the situation from a point of view that you wouldn't normally take, but with integrity, and then submit it to where you usually strive to see your work published, and then to where you usually wouldn't. And maybe consider creating a space for your unique voice, like a Substack, and be bold. So I think that there's a way to live in this media landscape where you can be truthful and have integrity in what you're bringing to the media space, and you can pay your bills at the same time by finding that balance between your freedom of expression and what's happening on the ground. And that because we live in this diverse space, that you can create an outlet for yourself, like a blog, where you can have your own opinions, but again, be transparent about how you got to those things. And then some ideas for strengthening your balanced, your balanced reporting muscles, is to make sure, like, take a look at where you're getting your news digest, your podcasts, and other digital news resources that you don't tend to agree with. I'll use myself an example. I listen to the Megyn Kelly podcast, which is, I would say, she's like turning into a very conservative commentator and like a dirt kicker in America. And I listen to her podcast once in a while to exercise the muscle in my brain that wants to reject everything that I don't agree with. And I kind of sit with it and have to really understand, why don't I agree with it, and to become more informed about how the quote unquote other side is perceiving what's happening. And I really believe in that, like sitting in the uncomfortable for a good long while. So I really have a good argument about why I don't agree with those things. And above all else, try to make everyone uncomfortable. It usually means that you're getting closer to the truth. That is my experience in things. I see Lukman's hand, so I'm definitely gonna call on you for a moment, but let me just see what else was written in the chat. Like Mustafa said, yes. Abdullah bin Khaled in Yemen, the main problem. Oh, here's someone from Yemen for, was it Rita who wants to speak to someone in Yemen? Yemen has the degree of independence by the free media has decreased. Yes, thank you for sharing, Abdullah. Lukman, please go ahead, unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Yes, I'm Lukman from Bangladesh. Our country is freedom, but don't democracy journalists. But our country, all persons here, our police. But all information he give up, but just some crime information, but hide our all journalists, but don't publish on our newspaper.
Yeah.
And any journalist, police and government crime, their crime scene, any journalist published their newspaper, and he arrest there.
Yeah.
this is our journalism system.
It's a very challenging situation. I have a filmmaker in Women's Voices now who's from Bangladesh, and she has kept me up to date on the dire challenges that she faces as a woman, as a filmmaker, as an environmental activist in Bangladesh, and it's unbelievable. I am in awe of how you maintain hope and continue the work that you do. I really do. It's incredible. It's really incredible. And Ahmad, your hand is up. Thank you, Lokman. Thank you.
Hi everyone. I want to talk about the freedom of journalists in Afghanistan. After the presidential government collapse, unfortunately, we are facing with the completely with the collapse of freedom, journalist freedom in Afghanistan. You know that journalists cannot even post any news against the government on their social media as well, because they will be arrested, they will be condemned for the opposite of the government, they will be sacked, and they will be go to the jail. And it's a very critical situation in Afghanistan, and we are not free, and we have lost our freedom. So it has been a very dangerous and also riskful job in Afghanistan to be a journalist. But still, we are trying to promote and also trying to release our facts that we are seeing in our society through other medias like social medias or by our colleagues outside of Afghanistan.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Seemingly insurmountable challenges, but you're here, so you must have hope on some level that things can change, however long that will take. Is that too idealistic to say?
Yeah, we are hopeful, but we don't know how long it will last.
Yeah,
because nothing is precast in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
because we are not in the content of the politician, and we are totally in unawareness about our future. What will be going on? It's unknown, unfortunately.
I obviously don't know personally how difficult it is for you, but I hear you, and I can't even imagine. And I'm thankful that you're here today. Yes, as Mona says, huge respect for you, Ahmad. Same for me, huge respect. And before I go to the last two slides, because we're actually out of time, for those who would like to know, Shahida Akhtar is the name of the Bangladeshi woman, and her film Fight Acid Violence is in our film collection. When you get this, you'll have the link to the film collection of Women's Voices now. Yes. Okay, so, and I'm happy to stay a few minutes longer. I just want to make sure to get through all the slides. So I put together this further reading and resource. I tried to not do too many, just to make it one slide worth of articles that I used to create this presentation up until yesterday. So you'll see different misinformation has created an alternative world for some Americans, fostering civil discourse, how do we talk about issues that matter, Middle East Western lens, misinformation, disinformation surrounded Thai 2023 election. This freedom and censorship podcast episode, I just listened to it yesterday, and it was actually, I was like, oh, I added it last night because it's a shortened version. You have to pay to get to the full episode, but it's worth listening to the 40 minutes because the guy does talk about how we're in this very strange moment where we have access to more information than ever. There are more content creators and journalists than ever, and we're in that moment of chaos. And while there's decreasing trust in the institutions, the people's desire to have a better world, to be informed, to be more tolerant, to live together, it's actually kind of rising to the surface. And that's how we see all these independent media outlets that are coming to the fore and are being subscribed to, and people are willing to pay for it. And so it's a conversation of freedom and censorship, but really acknowledging that we're in this moment of chaos in information. And we don't really know when we're going to get out of that moment of chaos, but there is historical precedent for similar times. It's just not, of course, looking the same because we didn't have internet and AI, et cetera, and so on. How and why misinformation is tempting to the brain. Inside Google's plans to combat misinformation ahead of the EU elections, a misinformation quick guide infographic, practicing quality journalism. Taylor Lorenz, tech journalist, the first influences were women because media did not speak to their interests, and weaponizing the law, attacks on media freedom. I thought just some like legal stuff could be helpful to you too in navigating your work. Yes, let me just looking at the, okay, and then final slide, if it will come up, is thank you and keep in touch. I'm the executive director at Women's Voices Now. This is a Google Voice number, so you can text it and I can text you back, or you can call it and I won't necessarily pick up the first time. That's my email. That's the website for Women's Voices Now. I just want to do a quick plug that I am continuing to do peace building work regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. If you'd like to see an interview that my Palestinian dialogue partner and I did for PBS, you'd click here. We created a short film. I couldn't resist the opportunity to share that with a group of journalists because, as we know, this is like one of the most important things that everyone's paying attention to, and it just seems to be getting worse. And even not in the region itself, outside, we're becoming more antagonistic toward each other. And so this is our contribution to trying to bridge the gap. So I would love to share that with all of you. Happy to continue to be in touch.
Thank you so much, Heidi. I always, from the bottom of my heart, enjoy listening to you. Learning from you is a fantastic experience because I really like how every time I listen to you, you encourage the audience to see the other side of the coin, which is really sometimes pushing us out of our comfort zone. But as human rights advocates, as journalists, as media professionals, or even as a citizen journalist, as many of us underline this new and growing trend of raising awareness over social media platforms, using the power that we have on virtual platforms to influence our surrounding on the rising issues of either political conflicts or geopolitical constraints standing in front of sustainable peace and development. So today we had another fantastic session. Just to wrap up some of the highlights, we spoke on the power that we have, as I mentioned, to produce information and the responsibility that has on our shoulders as citizen journalists or media professionals, or whichever category that our mission falls under. Some of the definitions that Heidi also unfolded in the discussion. We spoke, and this was a hot topic in session 1 as well, the cross line in between advocacy and journalism. It's a very intersectional area. I don't think there's a hard line, but we should respect our responsibilities, and the mission should be clear when we have the advocacy hat or the journalism had on us. So we also spoke on what counts as news or analysis. This was an important highlight as well, because this gray zone in between citizen journalism and content creator, being an influencer, is also critical in identifying what is news or not. Because of this power that we have on virtual platforms, individuals are usually lacking expertise in conflict resolution or foundations of international human rights law. We may not know what mechanisms are available to seek justice, to build transnational transitional periods in between the journey to take the conflicts to a resolution. So it's important to do a framework of where we are standing. And maybe coming to an end of my reflections, I want to also share this fact that I recently attended one panel session at United Nations, and the topic was information integrity, as it's one of the hot discussion items this year. And one of the experts underlined how news are becoming very cheap to produce. This is very important. So with the AI, and we will have one particular panel on this next Monday, and another colleague from Women's Voices Now will be joining us gladly. So we should be cautious of this economy, a very cheap economy to generate content, knowledge, deepfake. I think these are important pillars of our discussion today, and this weaponized content is really creating additional polarized end in our global society. And very interesting, as I think this really resonates with the discussion today, I would again highly likely encourage everybody in the room to check out there is one reporting of Freedom House, the repressive power of artificial intelligence. It was launched last year, but I think it's really, really, to this day, it's credible. And there was an indication saying that 78% of the global population live in countries where they're arrested or imprisoned for posting on political, social, or religious issues. So how do we navigate, through this oppressive environment where we are under a heavy risk of being deprived of our freedom, and how to navigate through this pollution of misinformation, and being aware that much of the information created out there are facilitated through cheap machines to boost information, either virtual, visual, or even now we know that podcasts might be manipulated, as deep fakes are posing a great threat for journalists and media professionals as well. So thank you so much. I'm not sure if Mehmet or Priyanka has any reflections to share. This is the time. I would love to hear from them as well. So please take the floor.
Well, thank you so much, Cemre, and Heidi. Thank you so much for very interesting and very educational training webinar. I truly appreciate it, and I learned a great deal of information about ensuring trust in the age of misinformation and disinformation. As a matter of fact, as the Journalists and Writers Foundation, we are not organizing, webinars on journalism, but we also ensure, the safety of journalists at the United Nations. 2 weeks ago, I was in Geneva, and I had a series of meetings, and one of the meetings was with the Special Rapporteur on freedom of speech and opinion, and we talked about how journalists in exile face tremendous amount of assaults, assassinations, or like intimidations and harassment. So we provided a report on that, but we also followed up on these threats against journalists. And I'm so inspired by all of our participants from different parts of the world in very difficult situations where democracy is not really lived, and so we are really truly inspired. Jim, I just would like to remind our participants about the journalism project very quickly. Okay, so just wanted to show you that if you go to our website, and if you go to blog, to our blog, okay, so you would find this information, journalism project. When you click on that, then you will get the information, okay? What is, this, writing a news article is about, and then the outline of the project. This is not, the latest information. I mean, the deadline is June 30th, and I shared the Word document with you. But for those who are interested in writing this journalism, news article, please contact me and let me know what topic of interest you're interested in writing a news article. And we would like to get these articles published in different news papers or news outlets, and also in our blog. So we have some examples over here. And so we would like you to get it uploaded. And just one more thing, okay? So everybody sees, all these, information on the website, but in order to, see the details and the video recordings and the resources of the speakers, so it is only for those who sign up. So we encourage you to sign up for this, so that, for example, I'm already signed up. Okay, so when you sign up, then you will be able to see the content of previous courses, and also these courses and resources on our website. So please go to, to sign up, and then just like this, okay, so you will see the media webinars 2023, 2022, and previous. So when you click on it, okay, and just one more minute and I will be done. So when you click on it, then you will see the detailed information, the speakers, the video recording, and also, the guest speakers, and also all the resources provided by the speakers. And we also have a summary of, the speakers. If you don't want to watch the whole thing, but you would like to read the summary, we have the summary and resources shared by our speakers. So for this, you need to go to the website and you need to sign up so you will be able to see all this information. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mehmet, for the reminders, and please email him, as he underlined, if anybody is interested in writing an article or being assigned a mentor along the way for another round of professional assistance. So Friday, we're having session 3, another training is coming up on establishing a solid professional foundation and upholding media ethics, which will be delivered by another fantastic expert, Jennifer Fenton. She will be serving in her personal capacity as a media advisor, but I think this is going to be another great session, as she's currently holding the position of spokesperson of UN's office on Syria as well. Another interesting discussion is coming up. She has years of experience in doing journalism on many different primary media outlets. So just want to remind everybody that we're meeting the same time on Friday for Jennifer's training. Again, Heidi, thank you so much. She's very much active on social media platforms, especially Instagram. So please go follow her up. Very kind in responding to any messages as well. So I would highly recommend taking this chance to remain in touch with Heidi. And thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Lovely to meet you all, and good luck. I hope we'll meet again. Thank you, Jemre. Thank you, Mehmet and Priyanka.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.